I finished Dexter a few days ago, and I just finished Dexter New Blood today, and I'm not too happy. Let me preface this by saying that overall, I think this is a great show, which is a huge reason as to why I'm so unhappy and dissatisfied. If this show was mediocre, its conclusion wouldn't sting so bad. At one point, this show was something special. The first few seasons were excellent. I remember watching season 1 being kind of curious as to what they were doing with the character of Deb's boyfriend. And then later on, I think in episode 6 or 7, during a scene, I put myself into the minds of the writers, and I only came to one conclusion. I just audibly gasped, followed by a holy shit. I was so on board with the story they were telling. I mean, a serial killer who only kills people who deserve to die, usually murderers. That is a very interesting story. The first 4 seasons were all top tier television. The season 4 finale set the show in a completely different direction. And if I'm correct, I think a lot of the creative team behind the show took this as a good exit point to move on to other projects. I like most of the following seasons too. The only season I do not like is season 6. I thought it was terrible. It belongs in the garbage bag at the bottom of the ocean.
Touch me!
I don't have any notes for it, as I was just watching the show for the first time and wanted to give it my full attention. But I remember the writing not being nearly as smart as it was in the previous seasons. It seemed like Dexter could get away with stuff in this season that he would have been caught for in previous seasons. There were way too many conveniences for Dexter, and he didn't need to be as cunning. I also just hated the whole religious aspect to the season. That didn't work at all for this show. For the most part, I even enjoyed season 8. I really didn't like the finale, but I can't let that smear the fact that I was enjoying the season up until that point. So what exactly was the issue with Dexter's finale? How did the show betray its audience? To me, the glaring problem with the show is its willingness to sacrifice its secondary characters, all in the attempt to prop up our titular character, Dexter. The killing off of Deborah Morgan is extremely perplexing to me. I'm fine with beloved characters being killed off. I know you're fine with it too. We're all cool with it. We know that everything can't be sunshine and rainbows. Something about this death doesn't sit right with me though. I think at a certain point in the series, Deborah became just as much of a main character as Dexter himself. She is a great character. Her death came out of nowhere. It wasn't telegraphed at all. The show was actually setting her up to get back together with Quinn and live a life without Dexter. I feel like what happened with Deborah was just a result of the writers and showrunners trying to be unexpected for the sake of being unexpected. The show did this before back in season 4, when Dexter calls Rita and you hear her phone ringing from within the house. Your jaw hits the floor. This worked. This was the consequence Dexter had to pay for letting Trinity run free as long as he did. Dexter made the choice each day to let Trinity live a little bit longer, putting others at risk. He could have killed him whenever he wanted. Season 8 had a nice conclusion just sitting there. I liked the idea that Dexter lets Daniel Vogel live. To me, the only 2 natural conclusions for this show would have been, number 1, Dexter can't give up killing, ultimately leading to him being caught or killed. Or 2, he realizes that he doesn't feel the need to kill anymore, that he can live out his days in peace with his son. The show did neither of those things.
At the end, though, he's going to have to get caught, isn't he?
It's going to have to resolve itself in some sort of satisfying way.
Jesus Christ.
First of all, I think it's really great that Dexter realizes he doesn't need to kill Daniel, that he chooses to leave him to the police. However, I do not believe that Dexter would want Daniel speaking to the police about anything. Daniel knows a lot about Dexter, and may even be able to prove he's the Bay Harbor butcher. I just don't buy that Dexter wouldn't have killed him for that reason alone. Sure, he doesn't have to kill him, but he also kind of does. Daniel's escape is so lazily written and hard to believe. Like, why was Clayton so quick to free him? A man in his profession wouldn't have done that. I'm actually surprised he didn't recognize him. Within about a minute of this nonsense, Deborah is shot, ultimately leading to her becoming brain dead, comatose, whatever that was. She was put on life support, and we, the audience, were told that if she were to ever wake up, her brain would basically be mush. What the f*** is this?
Things aren't going so well.
I can see that.
Does this sound like the conclusion for Deborah Morgan? What was going on behind the scenes of this? I feel like someone needs to be reprimanded for this. They shouldn't work in this industry ever again. I've just watched 9 seasons of a television show about a guy who kills people, chops them up into 9 pieces, throws their remains into the ocean, but this is some sadistic shit. I don't know who's responsible for the show's conclusion, whether it's the writers, showrunners, producers, or even Showtime themselves. But I feel like the parties involved just forgot what their jobs were for a bit. These people are storytellers. Dexter is a story. Stories are supposed to resolve themselves in satisfying ways. A show can end on a sad note, as long as it makes sense for the story being told. That's fine. This show is not only about Dexter. As interesting of a character he isn't enough to keep the show on its 2 feet. The characters around Dexter are critical, especially Deb. This is glaringly apparent in Dexter New Blood. They put Dexter in the middle of some town, out in the middle of a frozen wasteland, with characters who are about as interesting as a pube on a toilet seat. We didn't have Batista, Quinn, Dokes, Masuka, Lundy, Rita, Aster and Cody. As much as I didn't like LaGuerta as a person, she added something to the story. Miami itself was also a character in the show. While watching New Blood, you just missed the heat. It took me twice as long to watch that one season, Dexter New Blood, than it did for any of the main series seasons. What they did to Deb was out of nowhere. It was distasteful, all in the attempt to impact Dexter enough to get him into a position to where they could change the story and get it to a conclusion that they wanted. An unnatural conclusion. Imagine for a second, right? In the story of the 3 little piggies, if before the wolf could blow any houses down, some random hunter shoots it in the head and mounts it on his wall. What kind of a story is that?
I was only trying to make a point.
I missed the point.
I don't know why so many TV shows struggle to wrap things up. It's not like this is the first good TV show to have a bad ending. This happens too often. I think the problem is people trying to subvert expectations. I say f*** that. TV and movies are meant to be an escape. They're meant to entertain and satisfy. These are stories, things of imagination. If an audience has expectations, what's so wrong about giving them what they expect, if that's what makes sense to the story? The destination isn't nearly as important as the journey. It's really sad to me that this show isn't spoken about more. I think there's a whole generation of people who haven't seen this show. And ending the show in the way that they did just makes it that much harder for people to recommend. I really do feel sorry for the cast. To be actors on a highly regarded dramatic thriller, only for the higher-ups to grab hold of the wheel and swerve the bus off a cliff, is unreal. Michael C. Hall shouldn't have to talk about how the ending disappointed people. The cast shouldn't have to tiptoe around the finale of their own TV show, something a lot of them spent years working on. At the very least, this should have been a victory lap for the show. But imagine if they give us a final season where Dexter is being heavily investigated by the FBI, the walls slowly closing in around him. Dexter should have been caught. That was the logical progression for the story. Just imagine the possibilities. Imagine Dexter's true nature finally being revealed. What that would mean to his colleagues at Miami Metro and his family. Imagine how the public would have reacted. I imagine a lot of people would have praised him for what he was doing, ridding the world of murderers. Imagine how poetic it would have been if Dexter would have been given the death penalty and die strapped to a table, just like his victims. Imagine how cool it would have been if the executioner, the person administering the lethal injection, showed a little bit of hesitation. But that's all we can do. We can imagine. Because the creatives over there at Dexter chose to subvert expectations, rather than giving us the final season we expected, the final season we wanted, the final season we downright deserved. We were betrayed.